Hey, Amanda.
Hey, Tommy.
Do you remember this guy who took his shirt off and swung from tree to tree in a movie? I should be clear. This is from a movie.
Yeah, I do. That was the birth of my spank bank.
Yes. And he's having a renaissance or a...
Renaissance.
It's a renaissance. We're going to talk about him today on Can We Talk About?
I was never that far away. I guess I'm supposed to say you can't get rid of me that easy. I'm glad to be here. I wouldn't have it any other way, and I'm grateful to be doing the job that I love.
Can we talk about Brendan Fraser?
Oh, yeah, I love Brendan Fraser. Who does not love Brendan Fraser?
I wouldn't trust a soul that doesn't.
Are you down on the what are they calling it? The
Renaissance.
The Renaissance. Well, I think I asked you this when we were going to talk about Brendan Fraser in general. But a couple years ago, there was this really amazing, I think it was GQ article about Brendan Fraser.
It was. Yeah, you sent it to me. I hadn't read it until you sent it to me.
So what was your, so for context, this was, what year was that? It was 2018. So we're like 4 years removed from that article. But yeah, so in the article, and I'll tee it up because you read it more recently, right?
Yes.
But it essentially comes back to like he was ousted from Hollywood after being sexually assaulted and then calling the guy out for it. Or was it, but it wasn't public. Was it publicly?
From when I first started researching this, when we decided we were going to do this episode,
yeah.
I think he does publicly call him out for the sexual assault, but many years after it happened.
Okay. But it wasn't just the sexual assault, right? Because he also was like beating up his body, doing his own stunts and things. And then he was like a physically broken, like knees, and back and everything else, right?
Yeah. And so back to the sexual assault, it said he was sexually assaulted at this lunch in 2003. And then in 2018 is when he came out and said that it happened. And it was Philip Burke, who at the time was the president of the Hollywood Foreign Press Association. So I'm sure you can imagine what happens when you speak out against him. Does not go well for you. And I highly doubt anyone's going to support you because the support of him would then subsequently affect them. And I believe in all of that happened. He got divorced. His mother died. His body was broken. He's got an autistic son. It just was really not a good time for our poor baby Brendan Fraser.
And everyone who doesn't love Brendan Fraser. That was the thing too. It's like he was one dude who like there was nothing bad about him. There was nothing that ever came out like, oh no, about Brendan Fraser.
No, everyone says the nicest things about him.
And his career in general just sort of like fizzled. Like it just was like he was this big leading dude for a ton of roles, right? In like the late 90s, early 2000s. And then all of a sudden, like Snap just disappeared, right? He did all like those mummy movies and that was like
Encino Man.
My favorite. We got to go back. We got to go back to like over like the entirety career of Brendan Fraser in general. But because there's a lot of gems in there, even beyond some of the stuff that I think he's more well known for. But I was trying to figure out like the last movie he did prior to The Whale, which is the new one that's coming out, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But and apparently he was also supposed to be in Batgirl, which I think he was playing a villain.
Yeah, Firefly. Yeah, he was supposed to be Firefly in Batgirl.
Yeah. But I'll give him
he's
credit.
Be in Killers of the Flower Moon with Martin Scorsese. That's going to be incredible.
Well, that's all part of like the little Renaissance, right? The Renaissance. But prior, like 2018, like what was he doing? Was he in anything or like?
I don't know, but I do know that, not to skip ahead because we're going to talk about The Whale soon, but Darren Aronofsky says that he saw Brendan in a trailer for I believe it was a Brazilian movie. That's how Brendan Fraser came into his head. So he was doing movies. I just don't think that they were mainstream Hollywood movies. This was like a very small independent Brazilian movie. And he saw the trailer and was like, oh, he's incredible.
Yeah.
And that's, first of all, insane that to think of Brendan Fraser doing small independent Brazilian films.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking here and he was like, he had a role in some random The Poison Rose, which is maybe that was the movie you're talking about.
Probably.
From 2019. It's got John Travolta and Morgan Freeman in it too. Just a bunch like it I don't know. It seems like Robert Patrick's in it also. It's very much like it from looking at it, it seems like one of those like red box movies that you see where it's like, oh, it just has like some old actors that, grandpa will recognize and be like, oh, grab this movie. Doesn't know any better. But do you in general, do you have a favorite Brendan Fraser movie? I have a hands down favorite Brendan Fraser movie, but I'm curious.
Oh, it's Encino Man for me.
Encino Man, hands down.
It's hands down, but I will say, when I told my sisters I was doing this, they're like, oh, you have to say how you like felt, like I physically fell in love with him in George of the Jungle. I was like, oh my God. That was incredible.
That was what made it twitch for you? Was that?
Yeah, that was it. That was the quiver. But I will say that if I were to do in the order, I'm a big Mummy fan, like huge Mummy nerd, but I loved him in Airheads. Like I was. I mean, it's Steve Buscemi and Adam Sandler. How are you not going to love that movie? But
I was going to say that's the movie I go to all the time because it feels like it's sort of out of nowhere. It is hands down my favorite Brendan Fraser movie. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. I come from radio also. Maybe that's partially why I'm partial to it, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a really funny movie. Like it's fires on all cylinders and it's got a lot of great actors in it. And yeah, for some reason I feel like it just kind of flies under the radar. I don't understand why, but it
holds up too. The comedy holds up. I still laughed just as hard. I just watched it preparing for this. I rewatched that and I was like, oh my God, this movie's so good. It's so good.
And that's the thing about Brendan Fraser, that like all the roles, right? You compare like that to like School Ties, Blast from the Past, everything. Like one of the most panned movies he was in was this movie called Monkey Bone, which I kind of want to watch because I'm like, I remember what it was.
I remember when it came out, I watched it.
And it's got a lot of like respectable comedy actors in it, which is ironic too. But for some reason, like he can do wacky, zany, because I mean he did that around the same time he did the Looney Tunes Back in Action movie. But he could do that. He can do like romantic comedy. He can do the volcano. He can do the Mummy. He
did Gods and Monsters with Ian McKellen, for Christ's sake. Like he can do it all.
He's a versatile actor. I do, by the way, I have to say, I do love the fact that you tend to latch on to the two characters of his that are just like could barely speak English and operate.
There's something. I just want to stare at him.
I was going to say, I feel like I'm going into your psyche a little bit about what your but anyway, I mean, he's just a versatile dude. And I think like he wasn't necessarily written off. I don't think anyone ever gave him a second guess for a long time, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I remember watching Bedazzled, and I think that was around the Monkey Bone time. And I also feel like that was a time when comedy movies were getting to the point where there were a lot of really cheesy comedy movies being made at the exact same time. And there was a bunch of them, and some of them just, when it's all the same similar type of comedy, they get lost in the fight for people to watch them, I guess. Yeah. But I remember I loved Bedazzled.
Yeah.
It was one of those movies that would come on the weekends, and my sister and I would be like, ooh, let's watch Bedazzled.
Yeah. I mean, as a guy.
Is that what's called Bedazzled? Yeah. Elizabeth Hurley. So.
Yeah. I mean, I don't.
She made me question it. I was like, which one do I like more?
I was actually watching something recently. It might have been a TikTok where someone was talking about a scene in that movie where she's playing a school teacher, and there's like a math problem on the board, and it actually dates back to like being some kind of crazy like math problem that no one can solve, and it was like called like the devil's math problem or something. This is very inside. And do you know who directed Bedazzled? Because I was kind of blown away by that too. Harold Ramis
directed that fine piece of cinematic adventure.
Yes, that but perfect
would
for
not
my adolescence.
have guessed that.
No, not at all. And like out of all the movies Harold Ramis has done too, I'm just like, that does not pop out at me as something he would have done. But
no, sir.
Oh, okay. And I think it was one of his last movies? It might have been one of his last movies too. So,
I don't know.
Anyway,
but,
at least that he directed.
When I was researching, more about the person Brendan Fraser, not just the shirtless version that I think about all the time.
Yes.
It made so much sense to me. His parents are Canadian, so automatically the nicest people in the world. And then he grew up in the Midwest. It all checks out.
Yeah.
Sweet, nice, humble man who just did not get a fair shake.
No. Well, I mean, the thing is, he had his moment, and that was the thing too. Is I think
for sure
we were all robbed of Brendan Fraser in his prime, but yeah, I want to say it wasn't even necessarily that I don't know. We should just in general talk about his filmography, because I think going through it and like touching on like the highlights of his career is definitely valuable. And then wasn't he also, before we do that too, wasn't he also in he was in a TV show, like an underrated TV show?
Oh, I don't know.
I remember seeing Brendan Fraser's face on some TV show at some point. Like it was like one of those, like, I don't know, like DirecTV had their own channel, and it was I'm trying to find it myself right now. I think it was it Trust?
I don't know.
It might have been that.
Yes, Trust. I see it right here.
Yeah, because he was like in that briefly, and that was when you saw like, oh, he gained a little weight. He didn't look like Brendan Fraser a little bit, but he was in that series for like an entire season. Never watched the show, but I mean, I know it existed. But
I also forget that he was in Crash, which is like one of the greatest movies of all time. I don't even remember him being in that movie.
No, I don't.
Which now makes me sad.
What was his role in that movie?
Rick. It just says Rick. Okay.
Fair enough. I mean, it's not the one that obviously
Rick.
stands out, because that's like a big ensemble movie and everything. But like, I don't know what are your standouts? How about that? Maybe that's a good one, because there's also an early 90s one that I used to watch all the time on like Comedy Central that I love, that I'll mention in a second. But
Son-in-Law. Did you know he was in Son-in-Law? His Encino Man character. Yeah, I that is one of my, I would say, favorite Pauly Shore movies. I love that movie. And it says that he plays the same character he played in Encino Man. So it must be just like a mention. Yeah, it must be. Okay, so what is yours?
The Pauly Shore verse? I don't know what to call that.
Pauly Shore verse.
I mean, if we're just to touch on that briefly, because it's a very small list anyway, I would say in order, In the Army Now. Well, no, Encino Man, In the Army Now, and then Son-in-Law, in that order.
Okay.
Top to bottom.
That's fair. That's fair. I'll take it.
There is this very random, and I feel like maybe you'd like it too, because he's kind of airheady and quiet, and definitely in the Encino Man / George of the Jungle kind of personality. There's this 1994 movie called The Scout, where he plays this baseball player who's brought to the New York Yankees by a scout, which is played by Albert Brooks. And he's a baseball player, but he's troubled. He's got some stuff going on upstairs that he's got to deal with. And
I feel like I've seen this movie. I just clicked on it as you were talking about it, and I really feel like I've seen this movie.
I mean, it was like on repeat on Comedy Central in the 90s at some point. It's a
good name,
movie.
Steve Nebraska.
Yeah.
What a name. He could do porn with that name.
Exactly. I mean, maybe that's how the movie started being written, and they just rewrote it,
Fair enough for me.
Yeah. You're definitely touching on your love of
it was the 90s. I was,
Fraser.
It was fresh for me then. He's also in he has like a really small part. I can be misremembering this, so tell me if I am. In my favorite movie, Now and Then, isn't he like?
Ooh, is he?
I feel like he's like he plays the veteran that the one girl talks to, and I loved Now and Then when I was like, let me look at his IMDb.
I don't remember.
Yes,
that.
He's in.
Really?
Yeah, he plays the Vietnam veteran.
Damn. That's the thing. He was all over the place. And I don't know. What was his first, like, because, The Scout was 94 and he was in a leading role. I know he was in With Honors.
Encino Man was 92.
Okay.
School Ties was 92.
It's crazy.
And then Airheads was 94. In the Army Now was 94. It's the early 90s.
Yeah, I was going to say, I didn't realize how early on the 90s he was doing this. But
Blast from the Past was 99. So yeah, he came out swinging early 90s. Yeah. 91 is when his credits start.
Wow, I didn't realize that. So he started in 91. He did School Ties in 92. He was already playing, like, I don't know, second lead, whatever you want to call it, in Encino Man, right?
And then by 94, he's in Airheads and Army Now.
Airheads. Damn. He took off real quick. I'll give him credit there. I think the last Brendan Fraser-y movie in that kind of universe, and I never saw it, but looking at the resume, was like Furry Vengeance, which was 2010.
Oh, I did not see that.
Yeah, it's like a, it wasn't well reviewed, and a dude dealing with an actual bear. It's a kids movie, family comedy.
He was the voice one of Turbo Thunder and Fairly Odd Parents.
Yeah, he did a lot of voice work too.
Yeah,
which I didn't realize. His voice is unmistakable. He's got a very, you can't mistake Brendan Fraser's voice. But Blast from the Past too. You mentioned that. Bedazzled and Encino Man. Those are the big ones. School Ties. It's funny. I like him more as a comedic actor in general. But he was also, they try to get him in a few romantic comedies. Blast from the Past is technically a romantic comedy, but also like Mrs. Winterbourne. So, he was all over the place. He was in a lot of like school, college roles for some reason, always in like movies that had him in like a Ivy League school at some point.
He had that all-American boy face too.
He did.
But he did, especially for the 90s, like the strong jawbone and the,
Yeah.
But I will say that what brought me back to the world of Brendan Fraser, because I am, again, a huge Mummy fan. When I go to Universal, which I know you haven't been, but when I go to Universal, the Mummy ride is my favorite ride.
Yeah.
Like, it's still my favorite ride. And obviously the Harry Potter rides take precedent. I understand that, but it is still my go-to on the outside of the Harry Potter world. That is my go-to ride. And I did not, he came back on my radar because, again, TikTok. And it was this video that went viral of this girl who is a cosplayer, who is a huge Mummy fan. And all these people signed up for this virtual meet and greet during COVID, during lockdown.
Yeah.
To meet him, and he didn't think anybody would want to do it. So he thought it was kind of like, I guess, if you want to. He thought it was going to be him and this girl. And there was so many people that wanted to get in on this thing. And he's like emotional and crying. And she's like, just so you know, we're all rooting for you. We can't wait until you make something else.
Yeah.
And he's just crying, saying how grateful he is that people still remember him. And it's just like, remember you?
Yeah.
Are you kidding me? And that, to me, he was so emotional. I was like, oh my God, he's the sweetest man on earth.
Yeah.
And that's where I started to kind of dive into finding out like what happened. And I think in 2003, when the sexual assault did happen, I think that definitely started a trajectory of a, I wouldn't want to say a downward spiral, but definitely I think he started to pull back from the entertainment industry and focus more on his family and all that kind of stuff. And, and then you add on his mom dying and him and his wife getting divorced. And fun fact, he met his wife, Afton Smith, at a barbecue at Winona Ryder's house when she was dating Johnny Depp.
Wow. I was gonna say too is like the Hollywood foreign press can make or break you. To that point, they made Johnny Depp and they broke Brendan Fraser.
They sure did.
Yeah, that's the thing too. Is I'm looking at his career overall, and by the way, something very personal. I got to point this out. I never recognized this before. Your fiance looks like Brendan Fraser, or vice versa.
Well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
That adds up.
Like
that adds up.
I'm looking at the poster for like Extraordinary Measures where he's like looking over his shoulder and I'm just like, oh, I can see very facial features there. I can see the eyes.
No, I see it. I'm looking at this picture. I guess I started the spank bank early. This feels like
a subconscious thing. Yeah, I was going to say, this is a subconscious thing. And I didn't realize he was Canadian, which makes the whole Dudley Do-Right thing make more sense now.
Oh, Dudley Do-Right. Yes.
Yeah.
His uncle won a Olympic gold medal.
Really?
Yeah, I was reading his Wikipedia, and his uncle is a gold medal winner for, let me see what it was, in the 1952 Summer Olympics at the Olympic trap. And he was the only Canadian to win a gold medal in that whole years of Olympics was his uncle.
Yeah.
I mean, he comes from good stock.
Yeah, I didn't expect that. But anyway, have you read much about the new movie that's coming out, The Whale, which is the one that everyone's talking about? He got his big standing ovation for how many minutes was it?
6 minutes.
Yeah, which by the way,
standing ovation.
I want to point out, because sort of separate topic, but insanely funny to me, was that this was all happening at Cannes Film Festival. He got this big 6-minute standing ovation, right? And that was like the first day or two of the festival. And then cut to the Olivia Wilde movie out. That's
I told you, the drama.
Yes, there's so much drama about that movie, but and quite literally manufactured. They were like, well, that got a 10-minute standing ovation. It's like, well, now that they're doing these like elaborate standing ovations, and they did it to Brendan Fraser, it's like, well, now you have to have a longer standing ovation. You're going to hear like, oh, there was a 30-minute standing ovation.
At that point, just sit down and keep clapping.
My answer.
Just an ovation.
Yeah. But I loved how they tried to outdo Brendan Fraser's standing ovation.
Just let the man have his moments.
Yes.
But he cries and he does his little aw shucks kick at the ground. I was like, oh my God.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I prefer that. The last time we got like a Brendan Fraser in the audience meme was when he was at one of the award ceremonies. Ironically enough, might have been the Golden Globes, which is the one that's run by the Hollywood Foreign Press, where he like clapped his hands and snapped his fingers and pointed all at the same time. If you remember that one.
Yeah.
So we went from that and then like fast forward, and then it's like him, aw shucks, tearing up as everyone gives him a standing ovation. This dude literally doesn't have the confidence in himself to be like, I'm a good actor.
No,
and he puts
like
his
the
all
most
into
humble
it.
human.
Yeah,
I
love it.
He makes you want to give him a hug.
Yeah,
like I just want to hug him. I just want to tell him you're loved. We love you.
Yeah.
But the Whale, back to The Whale.
Yeah.
In it, he's like a recluse, right?
Yeah.
He's a recluse, and he's, I think, like a 600-pound man. And it's kind of the story about him and his daughter, who's played by Sadie Sink from Stranger Things, which is incredible. She is just killing it right now. And he's trying to reconnect with her because they're estranged because of his, being a recluse and his obesity, and he's struggling with it. And Darren Aronofsky said that it took him 10 years to make this movie because he was looking for the perfect lead. And then he saw the Brazilian movie trailer and was like, oh, there it is. It's Brendan Fraser. Yeah. And it's so true. I mean, I haven't seen the movie, so obviously I'm just going off of what I've heard, but just everything we've described about his character and who he is, like, he just a very sweet man who's going through things, who just, again, you just want to love. And I assume that's going to be similar to the movie.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing too is I read a lot of the same things you did. And one of the things I heard too is that Darren Aronofsky met with him for lunch in upstate New York, which I didn't realize this movie was filmed in Newburgh, New York, which is not that far from you either.
That's 10 minutes from where I grew up.
You could have just drove over there and give Brendan Fraser a hug on set.
I can't handle that. Can't handle that. Too much pressure.
But they apparently they had already done a lot of the movie. They had filmed a lot of the scenes and stuff, and just was missing the him in the movie basically. But you know, he lives upstate, and Darren Aronofsky decided to meet with him and said, "Oh my God, this is the guy!" Like upon like having coffee with him at some coffee shop in upstate New York. So,
I love that.
I love that. Also, it's becoming like the little Hollywood outside Hollywood, right? Because like we were on another episode of this, we talked about how Severance was filmed relatively close to Newburgh there too. Like they're all like upstate New York, not that far from New York City. Like, you know, you get a lot of stuff up there.
It's, you know what I think it is too, is it's a lot of untouched land, and there is not, seasonally, there's not a lot of people. So you can get some really beautiful, lovely downtowns with just the locals, and there's no, you know, the tourists have gone. Yeah. They've gone back to your neck of the woods. Yeah.
But this movie is coming out December 9th. And so I'll be really excited to see that.
Me too. We'll do another episode on that.
Yeah, we'll have to do a separate episode just alone on this specific Brendan Fraser movie. So you mentioned your favorite was, what was your favorite? Your favorite was Encino Man.
Encino Man is when I think Encino Man is just one of my favorite movies. It is just a feel good movie. Like it puts you back into the way I felt sitting on my parents' couch watching that on like a, you know, weekday night in the summertime. I was like, oh, this movie is awesome. And then it felt like a little adult to me, you know, because they were all like supposed to be teenagers, young 20s characters. And then my favorite moment for Brendan Fraser, clearly George of the Jungle. Clearly.
What was it about George of the Jungle?
He was oiled up with long hair and shirtless. That's what it was. That's full disclosure.
I mean, he didn't hide it either. I give you credit for that.
No,
it was just like straight up like, no.
Why would I?
You know, just
I would say most females or males that are attracted to Brendan Fraser will say that right around my age, I'm 35. They saw that. It did something to them. It happened.
I said it before. It made it twitch. It twitched.
It's the quiver. The quiver. Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm going to go through some of the movies one by one. So going back to Encino Man for a moment. I still to this day scream shush at people in the way that the bully dude in that movie does, and no one ever gets the reference, and it just sounds like I'm being an asshole. But I love that. Sean Astin's in that movie too, which a lot of people don't give enough credit for. And you know what? I just remembered another Pauly Shore movie from that era that I completely dismissed, and is actually probably one of my more favorites than. I gotta reorder these now. I forgot about Biodome.
Oh, are you kidding me? Biodome's free mahi mahi.
Free the mahi mahi. I know it's not a Pauly Shore episode we're doing, but just for context, for the record, it'll go. I'm going to think about this for a second. I feel like Biodome and In the Army Now kind of tie it out, but I'll give it to Biodome, and then Encino Man, and then In the Army Now, and then Son-in-Law.
Okay, see my Pauly Shore list. Son-in-Law's first.
Okay.
Encino Man, Biodome.
Okay.
Easily. But I mean, I still say where it does not warrant it, where it has nothing to do with it. If I'm doing like a tiny little task. Yeah. Perfect example at the distillery. We were making hand sanitizer during the pandemic, and we had to put a filter on it. And I was literally standing there. I was like, making a filter. And again, no one got it. And I was like, well, yeah, I hate you all.
One other thing from Biodome, I mean, again, we're not trying to go to this isn't a Pauly Shore episode, but worth mentioning, in Biodome, do you know who one of the women scientists are in that? Which I didn't know until later. It's Kylie Minogue, like the singer.
Yes, it is. And she's so hot with her little accent.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, now we have to do a Biodome episode. Remember the thing we were talking about before we hit record? That should be the episode that we do.
Wait, what? I completely now you can say it.
Our edibles episode.
Oh yeah,
should
absolutely.
Be Biodome.
Yes,
that's no brainer.
We need to
stay tuned.
Do a stoner movie while enjoying some edibles. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and it's gonna have to be Biodome, I think.
I mean, is Biodome a stoner flick though? I mean, it appeals to the stoner.
They're pretty burnt out the whole movie. And the beginning of the movie, before they get into the biodome, they're so high. That's the that's the whole point. They're just so high.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, it's really funny. The more I mean,
all right, you guys tell us what stoner movie we should do. How about that?
I mean, the ones that stand out for me, focusing on like the 80s or the 80s, 90s, 2000s stoner movies. You have like Dude, Where's My Car? You have Half Baked, because like I feel like in those movies, like I guess maybe that's the difference between like a Pauly Shore movie, is that you have to be stoned to enjoy a Pauly Shore movie as an adult, but there's no illicit like pointing of like they're stoned.
That's fair.
They're
because I also feel like were they not allowed to show it for a while, right?
Maybe that might be it too. Yeah. I mean,
I remember in that 70s show when they were talking about having it made, they said, okay, you can show the smoke and you can show that they're high, but we can never physically see any paraphernalia or a joint.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like that's continued on. I mean, well, if you go back to like the 70s and like, or in like the early 80s.
Fast Times at Ridgemont High and
Yeah, I mean, it was still smoke, right? And you had like Cheech and Chong movies. I mean, I think they were flat out smoking giant blunts, but
great movies.
Yeah. Anyway, Brendan Fraser.
Back to the thing at hand.
So we had Encino Man. I'm trying to go run through we could skip over like some. We talk about Airheads for a minute again too. I don't know. I got to give a lot of credit to like the makeup and the stylists in those movies because like turning Brendan Fraser, Steve Buscemi, and Adam Sandler into rockers, like Brendan Fraser and Steve Buscemi especially, like disappear into the characters, and they are entirely different people from, like, you look at Brendan Fraser in that, and with the long hair and everything, he is a whole different human being than George of the Jungle or Encino Man.
Oh yeah, the long hair though.
Yeah,
did it for me.
Yeah. But I love the silliness of that movie too, and you have there's a bunch of dudes in that movie from the world of comedy. There's one of the Adam Sandler collaborators whose name I forget. He's like in all the Adam Sandler movies. He's in there too.
Chris Farley's in Airheads.
Chris Farley, yeah, he plays the cop, which is great.
Judd Nelson's in there.
Judd Nelson. So is ironically enough, because funny enough, now that I think about it, there's a connection. Harold Ramis was also in, director of Bedazzled in a couple of years. Harold Ramis was in, maybe that's, Alan Covert was, by the way, the guy I was trying to think of. He was the guy from Grandma's Boy. That's a stoner comedy.
He plays the police officer, right?
Yes. The one who's like first on scene, like dancing across from Adam Sandler's Pip. Michael Richards is stuck in the air vents the whole movie. That's great. Michael McKean.
Who's the guy from MTV? Kurt Loder.
Kurt Loder.
And there's a musician this is good.
Lemmy.
Yeah.
Lemmy is God. Yeah.
Lemmy's God, and Rob Zombie's in it.
Rob Zombie's in it. Yeah. There's it's such a, it's a really good, I don't know. It's one of those movies that like all over the place, like these like little bit parts and stuff. They got a lot of really good actors. David Arquette's in it too.
That's killer. Now I need to I need to really rewatch it and focus.
Ernie Hudson plays the good cop. He's a good guy. Joe Mantegna was great in that. Anyway, I don't know. It's really good. There's a lot of good folks in there. And the Brendan Fraser along with Adam Sandler and Steve Buscemi to like disappear into their characters. Brendan Fraser is just this tall, skinny rocker dude who's just, like leader of the group. Everyone's looking up to him, and as he's trying to make his song,
make his demo,
break his band. Yeah. Which, by the way, I read somewhere and I forget it. And now it's going to piss me off. That the song that they play in the movie was written by an actual musician who's, now I have to look it up. The film features an original song by White Zombie. Anyway.
And then, he obviously kills the comedy thing, but then he does, like you said, Mrs. Winterbourne, which is Shirley MacLaine and Ricky Lake, which is hilarious. Ricky Lake, baby.
Man, that movie is definitely like a time capsule for the late 90s, isn't it?
You are not kidding.
Yeah.
And it's based on a book, which I never read the book, but book's called I Married a Dead Man, but it's loosely based, I guess.
Yeah.
That is a 90s film. I mean, once you say Ricky Lake.
Yeah. I forgot Ricky Lake even tried to have a acting career.
Yeah, she was really good at makeovers. She should have stuck with that, the makeover show.
We're taking a break from her talk show, the Ricky Lake Show.
Ricky Lake Show.
Was Mrs. Winterbourne before? It had to be after or during.
Yeah, it was 96.
Okay, yeah.
96.
So she was still doing her little talk show during that.
Yep, and then he did Glory Days as a cameo.
Was Glory Days?
That was 96 as well. And then The Twilight of the Golds was 97. And then George of the Jungle, also 97.
What was I going to say? Yeah, you have 97. I didn't realize how right in there with the late 90s he was. He was in that. He was also in, Dudley Do-Right was 99.
The Mummy was 99. Blast from the Past was 99.
Yeah.
Gods and Monsters was 98. He was just cranking them out.
That was like the year of, I didn't realize 99 was the year of Brendan Fraser. And then Bedazzled was the following year was in 2000. That's great.
Sinbad, Beyond the Veil of the Mist was 2000. Then Monkey Bone. I think I saw Monkey Bone. I'm not sure.
Yeah, Monkey Bone's
guessing
a
myself.
Weird one. It's worth mentioning for a second. Again, it's one of those movies, just to throw out here, because again, there are so many people involved in this movie that I don't understand. So it's based on like a cartoon or a comic, but essentially it's got Brendan Fraser, Bridget Fonda, Chris Kattan, Whoopi Goldberg, Rose McGowan, John Turturro's in there. Gus Fring from Breaking Bad is in there too. I mentioned Bridget
Megan
Fonda.
Mullally.
Bob
Odenkirk.
Bob Odenkirk is in there, and so is because he plays like a surgeon. Yeah, there's just a lot of like respectable comedic talent in this movie, and apparently it was produced by Chris Columbus as well. So
that's awful.
Yeah,
poor Chris.
But again, it was one of those movies that like it was a major bomb at the box office, but I feel like, does it have a cult following? Is it one of those movies that has a cult following?
I don't know.
Or no?
I don't think so. Maybe we could resurrect it.
Maybe.
Just for the Renaissance.
For the Renaissance, yeah. Anything with him in it is worth a second look. I'll go back and watch, I'll happily go back and watch Looney Tunes Back in Action for Brendan Fraser.
I will too.
Yeah.
He was in Dickie Roberts. I did not realize that.
Yeah, I didn't realize. You'd have to see
Plays
Dickie
himself.
Roberts okay, that makes more sense. I appreciate that.
Did not see Dickie Roberts. Full disclosure.
Yeah, most people didn't.
Mm-hmm.
And then he has a credit for G.I. Joe: Rise of the Cobra. Was he a major character in that? Did he actually?
Not that I remember.
Was he a voice or something? Or where Brendan Fraser? It says he played Stone. I also didn't see G.I. Joe movies, so I couldn't tell you.
Let's see. He's in The Air I Breathe.
Yeah.
Journey to the Center of the Earth. And that's kind of where I think he starts to lose it. After that, that's when they start to get a little rough.
Yeah. And that's where he falls. That's where it kind of falls off. He did some voice roles though, too. That I'll give it to him there. The important thing too, and this is what I think where, he was so prominent in all these blockbuster movies for such a long time, right? Like from like the mid to late 90s to all the way through like 2003, 2004. And then suddenly there's like a break. There's a few of the Mummy movies here and there. But aside from that, then he starts trailing off. And then by like the 2010s is where he doesn't fully disappear, right? He's doing a lot of he did like some direct to DVD kind of movies, and he did some,
he did a TV.
Yeah, he did TV for a while. He had a handful of TV roles. He never really stopped working. I think he just disappeared from like the being like visibly up in front of us at all times and being a leading man. That's the part that I think shifted. But you know, and this is my little tangent about Brendan Fraser is I think while he disappeared from being someone who's up in front, leading man, you know, on the marquee, I think the difference is he was always a really good actor. And that was the part that was like sort of missed. So I think now, even though he's not like leading man, he's not, you know, I mean, Tom Cruise is way older than him and like still, you know, running like Mission Impossible franchises and doing his own stunts and stuff. And while maybe that's behind Brendan Fraser, but like him being like an amazing actor and pulling off these amazing roles, I'll take that. Absolutely.
I agree. And it seems like the movies that he has coming up. So we've mentioned The Whale and talked about that. I think that's really gotten the attention of most people for him, but he was supposed to be in Batgirl. I know that there's some issues with that release, but he's going to be in Killers of the Flower Moon, which is huge and is completely star-studded. And then he's also going to be in this movie called Brothers, which I don't know if you've heard about that. That's going to be a comedy. And it's going to be him, Josh Brolin, and Peter Dinklage with Glenn Close. I mean, like, that's going to be amazing.
Yeah, I'll take that. I mean, that's the thing, too, is like if he starts popping up again in those kind of roles and we start seeing a little bit more of if we start seeing a little bit more Brendan Fraser in roles that fit him, I don't think we need to see him running around breaking his body in like Mummy sequels again. And on top of that too, like there is a point too of like the early 2000s action movies of like that bad CGI, like they don't necessarily hold up. But yeah, no, I think you know what it is. I think there's a handful of, I think there's a bunch of movies that are, I don't have no idea where that tangent was going. My brain broke halfway through that thought, but yeah, I think everyone's just happy to see after everything that happened and there was this giant Me Too movement. And then Brendan Fraser stands up and raises his hand and says, I was sexually assaulted. We saw that he kind of he turned away from the industry because of that. And like powerful dudes who just can, you know, blacklist him like that. It's great to see this. It's great to see like him.
It's great.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how excited I am about Killers of the Flower Moon. Like, you know, I am one of the people in the world that love stories about murder and true crime, and I'm fascinated with it. And so that's based on a nonfiction book called Killers of the Flower Moon, which I've read, which is so incredible. And it's about the Osage murders and the birth of the FBI. And so it's based on a true story, but the people in that movie, I think it's just, like you said, a testament to how good of an actor that he is, because he's Robert De Niro, Jesse Plemons, Brendan Fraser, Leonardo DiCaprio. Like, are you kidding me?
Yeah. John
This is going to be a Scorsese film. So it's going to be incredible.
Yeah. And it's an Apple TV film with a giant budget, which is worth mentioning.
$200 million.
Yeah. That's insane.
That's many dollars.
But to your point, right? To be like, to see, you know, DiCaprio, De Niro, Fraser, like that's a pretty good, I appreciate the fact that he's showing up in these things. And
me
I
too.
hope, and it's very clear. I mean, based on everything we've seen and heard from The Whale and his interviews and everything he's done ever since, it's clear that he is passionate about acting and really wants to be a great actor and does have the talent. And so the fact that he's sort of getting a second chance at not just, you know, like not having to do direct to DVD movies, but like he's getting a second chance to do these kind of things in star-studded roles is like getting what I think we can look at and be like, oh no, this guy deserves it. He's got the talent.
Yeah.
You know, he was turned away when he shouldn't have been and all those things. People forget, right? Like, you go back to the 90s, for better or for worse, John Travolta was literally written off as like, oh, he was that dude from Welcome Back, Kotter. And then he showed up in Pulp Fiction
and
where Tarantino gave him a shot, and then suddenly
slayed the show.
Yeah. And then here we go, like the renaissance of his career. I remember like talking, and he's back in the 90s, but I remember people talking about the renaissance of, like John Travolta's career getting like a second chance. And so, I mean, it's very different circumstances, but if we see like a resurgence of Brendan Fraser getting some more leading roles and getting to like really stretch his acting
roles
legs.
too, like really complex roles. So far, I think the most exciting part for me is, while I joke about how much I loved him, he, like you said, is a great actor. And so I'm excited to see maybe the second half of his acting career. And this, the second half of the Renaissance is going to be him really getting to show his acting chops and play these beautifully complex characters. And I mean, it's insane how the whole world came together. Yeah. And is like, we are so happy that this is happening to him. He's the best. It's like everybody universally, like I said before, wants to give him a hug.
Yeah. And one of the things that he was a standout, he was sort of standout for, and he only was in, count them, 3 episodes, but worth noting, people still talk about his guest role on Scrubs from the early 2000s. Did you ever watch that?
Yeah, he's in a few episodes, right?
I had to look it up, and I counted. It's literally 3 episodes, but it was impactful. Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. It's like so impactful, and it's so stand out of like, you think of Scrubs, you're like, oh yeah, remember all those episodes with him? It was like, nope, just 3 episodes.
No way.
Yeah, which for those that don't know, he plays a character who's dying, and in that role, like ends up like, he was really big into taking photographs, right? Like with his camera. He uses a Polaroid camera and takes pictures, and anyway, it has connection to the rest of the series as well. But what's actually funny is 2 things. Number one, he is an actual amateur photographer, right? Who's really into photography. And so he ended up like, in the episode, he was using like a Polaroid camera and got a lot of like, they dedicated a book about instant cameras to him, like crazy stuff. He's also like an amateur archer, right? We mentioned how he like owns horses. This dude has a lot going on for him, and has been kind of pulled down by like pushing himself so hard in movies that he quite literally broke his knees.
Broke his body. Did you know that he was turned down for Dazed and Confused? He was originally considered in Dazed and Confused. I'm not sure. I'm assuming, one of the many stoners, but I can't believe he was turned down. But Vince Vaughn was also considered, also turned down. Yeah. But I remember reading an article early on that he was turned down for Dazed and Confused. They approached him about it, and then obviously went into another direction. But I could totally see him in that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing is, I mean, he clearly he's done sort of like stoner-ish. Although now that I think about it, I don't think any of the roles he's played around stoners, right? Because like in Encino Man, he wasn't a stoner. He was just quite literally, he was from the Stone Age.
He was from the Stone Age.
Was that like something from the trailer too? Like, he's from the Stone Age. They're just stoned, But yeah, I mean, the dude is like, he's a good dude. I gotta give him credit. Like, again, there's not a lot bad about him that anyone has ever said. But like, even reading up on this too, and I know you did a lot more research than even I did, but like the fact that like he was unable to meet some like child support payments because he wasn't getting work was like, is a little like, that's painful, especially where this guy came from. And like
how massive he was.
Yeah.
Like the late 90s, early 2000s, like he was the it boy.
Yeah.
That's so crazy to me.
Yeah. But anyway, everyone loves him. And I'm excited for the Killers of the Flower Moon as well. Where does the title come from? Do you know? You're into this. I feel like you would know.
So it's based in Oklahoma, and the whole, I can't tell you, it's going to give a lot away.
Oh, okay.
You haven't watched or read it yet.
All right.
But,
so I'm not allowed to know.
Think murder.
Okay.
My favorite. But I would give stuff away.
Okay. I won't ask anymore.
Can't give it away.
Don't.
Birth of the FBI. The Osage murders. That's where it comes from.
Okay. I'll take it. Anyway, this was fun. I love talking about.
This was fun. I'm looking forward. I'm Team Renaissance. I'm looking forward to seeing what else he does and kills it in. And we will come back and obviously definitely talk about The Whale, talk about Killers of the Flower Moon. We'll talk about it all.
I was also looking it up too. You mentioned he was in Now and Then. That was uncredited. He was also in Brain Candy, the Kids in the Hall movie. Apparently also uncredited there too, which I didn't realize. But I thought that was kind of funny.
That's awesome.
I know. It's really funny. There is definitely a threads of because the one random movie that I can't stop talking about for whatever reason was Monkey Bone. In Monkey Bone is one of the guys from Kids in the Hall, and then there was like a connection to Kids in the Hall, so he was like in their movie in the mid 90s, I guess. So
I feel like I have to watch it now.
Yeah,
I'm gonna watch it, and maybe by the next time we record, I'll just tell you if my brain was melted or not.
Yeah. Anyway, this is fun.
It's always fun.
Always fun. All right. See you next time. Bye, everyone.
Bye.